we saw Vice President Harris appearing on the hugely popular podcast Call Her Daddy today. It is one of the most listened to podcasts among women. It focused a lot on reproductive rights, her interview did. I can play a clip. Let's listen to it.
At a rally in Pennsylvania, former President Trump recently told women, "You will be protected and I will be your protector." What do you make of that?
So he who, when he was president, hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did just as he intended. And there are now 20 states with Trump abortion bans, including bans that make no exception for rape or incest, which we just discussed, which means that you're telling a survivor of a crime of a violation to their body they don't have a right to make a decision about what happens to their body next, which is immoral. So this is the same guy that is now saying that. This is the same guy who said that women should be punished for having abortions. This is the same guy who uses the kind of language he does to describe women. So, yeah, there you go.
And so, Chuck, as Katie was just saying, right now is about trying to find those people who you think would vote for you and motivating them to actually vote, as you were also saying, too. And so 2 things here. You see the vice president sitting down in kind of a non-traditional space. Years ago, we probably wouldn't see a presidential candidate. Podcast didn't exist, decades ago. But in this kind of more non-traditional space, not a political show, clearly trying to reach female voters that maybe haven't engaged here with an issue they think will work in their favor.
You know, I'm lucky enough where my firm is working on 26 House races and 3 Senate races. And I tell you that to say that across the country in all of these states, when it comes down to the very end, let me pull the curtain back and put y'all in the room of the strategist. It comes down at the presidential level on who you like and who you trust. Everybody who cares vehemently about an issue or one issue, pick your issue is the thing, they've made up their mind. There may be 1 or 2%. I think that's even a lie of folks that are undecided who really care about an issue. So when you talk about trust and who you like, that's why getting very personal in these podcasts really matter, because again, it's about motivating people to vote. At this point, Democrats are worried about folks showing up and not voting for Donald Trump. We've got the votes we need to win. We're worried about folks who stay home, who are working 2 jobs, who may be too busy. And that's what this comes down to. Did they hear the podcast? Did it move them because they really liked her, or they trusted her, or they don't like her, they didn't trust Donald Trump?
29 days to Election Day, but today more people are voting. Early voting begins in California, Montana, and Nebraska, which really reinforces the reality that the presidential candidates have literally 0 time to waste to get their message out as people are starting to vote. On that note, Vice President Kamala Harris is launching a week-long media blitz, something that she has been criticized for avoiding so far. She kicked it off by sitting down with the hugely popular Call Her Daddy podcast. CNN's Priscilla Alvarez is joining us now for more on this. You know, Alex Cooper, the host of the podcast, she said kind of in the introduction that she was given 40 minutes with the vice president for this interview, which is a long time for anyone who has interviewed a president or a vice president. So what did Harris say?
A long time, but Call Her Daddy has millions of listeners, many of whom are young women. And while they talked about a range of issues, a lot of the focus was on women's issues, something that Alex Cooper said she was going to stay focused on given her audience. And over the course of that interview, the vice president was asked about former President Donald Trump's comments that he was the protector of women. And this is what she had to say.
So he who, when he was president, hand-selected 3 members of the United States Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And they did just as he intended. And there are now 20 states with Trump abortion bans, including bans that make no exception for rape or incest. This is the same guy that is now saying that. This is the same guy who said that women should be punished for having abortions. This is the same guy who uses the kind of language he does to describe women.
Now, this is not unlike the message that you hear from the vice president at her rallies, but not everyone listens or watches those rallies. So this is the campaign trying to amplify that message at a moment when polls show neck and neck race between her and Trump. So over the course of this week, she has 60 Minutes today. That was already taped. Tomorrow, she will be with The View, The Howard Stern Show, and The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Then later in the week, she has Univision Town Hall in Las Vegas. Tim Walz also going to be out there with Jimmy Kimmel tonight. Now, she's trying to reach different audiences here. For example, The Howard Stern Show, mostly a male audience. The goal from the campaign, they say, is to try to boost turnout, especially in the last few weeks of the election and as some states are already beginning to vote. But certainly what we are watching unfold here is a campaign that is trying to reach more voters where they may be, knowing that this race continues to be just so close. Kate?
So close, so far into the cycle, and has proven that there hasn't been a single thing that's really moved anything in a significant way. It now comes down to the turnout, of course. It's good to see.
Let's turning back now to the 2024 race for the White House and to this response from Kamala Harris to these comments from Arkansas Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders.
My kids keep me humble. Unfortunately, Kamala Harris doesn't have anything keeping her humble.
Trump's former press secretary making those comments at a campaign event in Michigan last month. Harris does have two stepchildren, Cole and Ella, through her 10-year marriage to the second gentleman, Doug Emhoff. In an appearance on the Call Her Daddy podcast released Sunday, Harris described what she called her, quote, very modern family.
They are my children, and I love those kids to death. And family comes in many forms, and I think that increasingly, all of us understand that, this is not the 1950s anymore. Families come in all kinds of shapes and forms, and they're family nonetheless.
In a statement to Politico this weekend, Governor Sanders said this, quote, I would never criticize a woman for not having children. The point I was making, and that Kamala Harris confirmed by her own admission, is that she doesn't believe our leaders should be humble. Okay. Chris Wallace, this issue of children, the childless cat ladies, it has started to permeate this campaign. I know you and I have talked a lot about masculinity and femininity and how all of that is also swirling through this campaign. How do you think Kamala Harris handled this? Because the reality is there are so many American voters who don't have families that look like, mom, dad, married for 30 years.
Well, you used an expression in your lead, and you used Modern Family, which of course was the name of a very, very popular sitcom.
It's
and
amazing.
there were all kinds of families, and a same-sex couple that had children, and other couples. And in America in 2024, they do come in all shapes and sizes, and there are blended families and parents and step-parents. And, the idea of shaming somebody because she didn't have children the old-fashioned way, she has stepchildren, it seems to me is really out of touch with where the country is now and not something that the Republican Party should pursue.
It seems like a risk also of alienating a lot. There's a lot of Republicans who have stepkids or, you name it.
Totally.
Modern families.
That is exactly right. I also think it is super smart for the Harris campaign to be going out there and doing all of these types of interviews and reaching voters who may not normally be paying attention to the quote-unquote traditional media. No offense to CNN, we love you, but she's going out there and she's talking to women
she
who
actually
get
did
their
do an interview with CNN. I will say that.
They're getting their news from podcasts like this, and I think it is super smart to be talking about issues like abortion and family and the economy in places where women are paying attention to, not in the normal mainstream.
Look, it's a strategic shift and going out there more. Certainly Tim Walz did a Sunday show yesterday. She's doing, obviously, Call Her Daddy and a couple other shows, I believe Colbert and others. Some of the hosts, most of them are openly supportive. She's doing CNN, and we'll see 60 Minutes. We'll see how that shapes out, obviously a more mainstream interview. But it does represent, both in tone and also just going out there more in this last 4 weeks of the campaign. They obviously feel they need to get out there more and fill the vacuum that wasn't being filled.